Pi to be or not Pi to be? That is the question. And to be honest with you, this video won't be that much of an answer either. But for those of you who have followed me for a while, you'll know that I've had a Raspberry Pi kicking around for a while. Not that I've had that much time to do very much with it, but the Pi drive hit the headlines, so I decided to dust it down and do something. Right, I won't take you too much into the details of the Raspberry Pi. You can look that up for yourselves, but here it is in this case. There is a green acorn on top of it, which is in honour of Acorn Computers, who created the BBC Micro and all that range, the Atom, etc., 30 odd years ago. They were also the crew that invented the ARM microprocessor, which is what's in the Raspberry Pi. It's also in a good number of our mobile phones. Now, Intel have attempted to mount a challenge to the Pi. Unfortunately, I don't think it quite came off. Microsoft were developing Windows 10 for both the ARM architecture and also the latest Intel chip, but because of problems with the Intel chip in terms of, I think it was managing to cut the operating system down to size, they abandoned the Intel chip and have chosen ARM as the official platform for Windows 10 and the Internet of Things. Intel, meantime, have hit the press over the last few weeks or months with various head culls, and I was reading another news article in the IT press today of yet another head cull at Intel. So, net result is keep an eye on ARM, it's going to do big things, and after you've seen what I show you now, yeah, you'll probably want to keep an eye. Now what we have is a Raspberry Pi 2B Plus in the box. It's not the newest, I don't think. I think there's a Raspberry Pi 3 out, so you're not looking at the latest technology. It's being powered, get this, it's being powered by the USB port from my HP server. Isn't that cool? That's the cable that's pretty much going in the back here. That's the power cable for the system. It's got HDMI coming out, which is being fed over DVI. That DVI is going off to a switch, a KVM, basically. You also have a jack in here for audio, not that I use it. You have, I think this is gigabit networking now, possibly. And 4 USB ports, one of which is also going to the KVM and one is going to the Pi drive. Now the Pi drive is in this case here, if I just try and move this bleeding camera. Now, one of the things is that that's not the official Western Digital Pi drive case. Where to begin? Long story short is actually Western Digital are not the first to come to name with a Pi drive. I think somebody else was. There's some sort of flash drive unit which fits inside the Raspberry Pi. But anyway, this is the Western Digital Pi drive, and if you have a look at this, you'll pretty much see what they were doing. Now, they do have a sort of enclosure, an official enclosure, which is basically a plastic envelope which sits on top of a plastic thingy-what's-it, which is basically you just slide the whole thing in, which is the Pi drive and the Pi, and yeah, the long story short is that this picture doesn't even give you a hint to all the cables that you can see in front of you, and it's a bit of a mess. However, one of the key elements is the Pi drive cable. Now, the Pi drive cable is a bit of a mess. However, what it does is you can see that this is the DC in, which is again being powered by USB off the main server. However, it is in a separate bank, so it is feeding off a separate 2 amp That then goes into this plug here, which is basically USB 3. One goes off to the USB for data, and the other one is supposed to go off to this power to power the Pi. However, I had some problems. Doing it that way, the Pi was reporting that it didn't have enough power, and also the drive itself wasn't spinning up. Instead of the official Pi case, what I used was a standard case for a 2.5-inch laptop drive. I had to cut it a bit because the socket is not in the center, and drilled some holes for air and installed some of this. Now this is just basic. I can only get it in small sheets of 140mm square, but it's basically there seems to be two elements to this. One is the sort of thick honeycomb that you can see in the camera, but there's another film behind it, so it allows air through, but it's pretty much dust proof. It's also the stuff that I'm going to install on the Thermaltake case eventually, which didn't come with very much dust protection. Oh well. So the long story short is, there it is. Now what I did in terms of drive space, my apologies if I phase out, this microphone needs a new battery. What I did was get a micro SD card and put the Raspbian operating system on it. Then I just expanded the partitions so it took up the whole 16 gig of the card, and away we go. There's actually plenty of room on there. So long story short is it's running quite nicely. It's also running through the KVM to the TV that I've got. Now, remember that this is going through HDMI, which is going to DVI. If you're an experienced tech, you'll know what's coming next. If you're not, this will just be an opportunity for me to show you something. Okay, this is the TV, the monitor. I'm just going to try and lock off, zoom out, and let this thing sort of try and stabilize, and hopefully it will take care of its own exposure. I'm just going to lock that off so it doesn't mess around. Now, I've taken the liberty of copying some music over to this. I know what you're going to say. Hang on, music? That was a DVI connection, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, fortunately for me, this is the free YouTube music. Yes, long story short, let's turn that off. Yes, in other words, the music was coming out of the HDMI port, going through the DVI, and the DVI was going through a KVM switch, which was then going through another DVI output port, which was then going up to the TV, and the TV was able to pick up the audio from the stream. Pretty much the long story short is that the DVI standard is capable of carrying both digital video, analog video, and digital audio. Now I'm just going to move the camera back a little in order to just sort something out, because I'm running headphones because of the way that I'm hooking up the microphone, so I can actually be sure of what I'm speaking. Now, there you go. So how powerful is this very, very cheap computer? Well, it's actually got hardware video acceleration in on it. Now, one of the various bits and pieces that I tested with was Red Hands, which is a video by Walk Off the Earth. Now, if I just bring up that video, is resolution of 1920 by 1080. and it played it flawlessly. And I had top running, and the thing didn't even hit 10%. What can you do? There is, in the image, is a piece of software called, oops, I'm looking at the wrong one, called OMX Player. That's Oscar Mike X-Ray, OMX Player. Now the problem with OMX Player is control. In order to do what I'm about to do next, basically I'm on another machine and I'm using SSH to go into the box. What I've also done is I've mapped a network drive to the server. So what you're about to see next is a sped up, is one of my Steve Crusoe gaming videos, and I've got to use the other keyboard to run it, because when I run this it'll run full screen basically, and you're seeing it pulling the data from the server and running it. Oh, they're coming to see me off. Don't worry, I'm coming back. At this point I'll probably leave you guys with some music as I try and head back to base. Just gotta hope I can find this place again. See you in a minute. Now this video is, where is it? 1280 by 720, 30 frames per second, and that's actually doing quite well. And I'm just going to jump using the controls in here. Ah, there's those bleeding chickens. Pains in the neck, those chickens were, you know. Right. Long story short, what you've just done is witness that thing playing 10280 by 720 video with audio, and it was at high speed, so that video was changing quite rapidly, and I was watching top at the same time. It didn't even get into 10%, probably down to the hardware acceleration on the video, saving the processor an awful lot of work. But at the end of the day, how much does this thing cost right now? I'm just going to find out. Let's have a look. The Raspberry Pi 2 Model B. It wasn't the B+. It's a 900 MHz quad-core ARM Cortex A7 CPU. It's not exactly the latest. And this one was released in February, February 2015, so it's a year old. The question is, where do I buy it? Let's try RS Components. They list this one as... let's have a look. They're not actually selling it, are they? I don't think it's actually available for sale there. But, oh, come on. What I want to do is find out how much it is. Okay, the Pi 3, the latest, the Pi 3 Model B is £30. You know, and you can pick up a case for about £6. And there's a Media Center kit, which you can buy for 50. A Pi 3 starter kit, again for 50. Which contains various cables and other bits and pieces, and a couple of a card. It doesn't look like you can actually buy the 2B anymore, but yeah, the Raspberry Pi, or can you? Nope. The Pi 3 is pretty much all you can get, which is what chip's in that. Let's have a look. Okay, that's running a 1.2 gigahertz quad-core ARM Cortex. So, and it comes with 1 gig of RAM. And the usual, I think it's just 100 base T network. Whereas that compares to the one you've just been watching, which was a Pi 2, and that's only a 900 megahertz quad core, again with 1 gig of RAM, so that's not too bad. But this one has been overclocked to a gig, so you're getting an awful lot of machine for your money. And when you look at what this is capable of, wow. For such a low power, low cost machine, that ain't bad. And that's pretty much the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying, in that I think it's only going to be a few years before you see desktop computers in businesses running Raspberry Pi or the equivalent ARM processors. And you know, they are just so cheap, so power efficient for the power that they're putting out, and with Windows 10 on one of those, you know, it's only going to be a few more steps to add a bit more RAM, add a SATA interface for a hard drive, or even use onboard flash with eMMC, is that it? I've forgotten the acronym again. But it's only going to be a small step before these machines are just able to go into enterprises, hold their own for quite a number of years. You know, they're not going to break down anywhere near half as much, you know? And just look at the footprint of the darn thing, you know? Just look at the footprint. I mean, good grief. Let's just try and get my, just look at that. You know, that is absolutely bleeding tiny compared to the Pi drive itself, which is a laptop hard drive. You know, car. So, yeah, you're looking at a heck of a lot of machine for not a lot of money, and, yeah. Now, before you actually run out and get one, I've got to sound a few warnings. The first is that you're pretty much limited to storage with what's on board. The operating system is Raspbian, which is obviously a variant of, is it Linux? I think it's Linux rather than BSD. I'm not 100% sure, you'd have to check on that. But it's not exactly the most, as you've seen, it's not exactly the most user-friendliest of interfaces. You know, as you can see, it's a bit rough around the edges, and it's looking where it's a lightweight Linux distribution, basically. Yeah. And there's still more software porting to be done, because a lot of the software that's out there still has to be ported. Whoops, it's gone to sleep on me. But anyway, I think that's as good as time as any for me to actually sign off this video, because pretty much this is what's coming, ladies and gentlemen. This is what's coming. Low-powered machines with a considerable amount of punch, and, you know, nothing like the form factor that they used to be. Wow. Catch you later. Bye for now.